So this is really interesting. When you see people talk about the Ukraine war on corporate news, they don't talk the same way they talk when they're talking to each other when they don't think anybody is listening. And so when they talk to each other, military advisors or people who know in what's going on in the know or in the know about what's going on in Ukraine, they talk about it one way. But when they talk to the public, they talk, and this is a good insight, right? So on May 31st, the Council on Foreign Relations, with its head Richard Haas, they had a public discussion about the state of the war in Ukraine. One of the participants was the former Deputy Commander of the United States European Command, Stephen M. Twitty. He knows and makes absolutely clear where the war stands. So who is this guy? This guy. So this guy was, again, he was the Deputy Commander of the United States European Command. Okay? Look at all those medals he has. Jesus Christ. And so now listen to how they talk to each other. So they're doing a Zoom and they're talking about Ukraine. Listen to how they talk to each other.
Yeah, Richard, I'm going to give a little bit more color in terms of what I'm seeing here. I think the war in the Donbass is starting to turn to the Russians' favor. And when you take a look at, and I'm particularly talking about the eastern part of the Donbass, the Russians have transitioned from trying to pour all their combat power into the Donbass to obliterating every single town, whether it be Rubenstein, Lyman. They're working now on Severodvinsk, and Luchitsk as well. They're obliterating these particular towns, and that's how they're making their headway. They're not putting a bunch of combat power with infantry forces and tanks in there. They're taking all their artillery and they're treating it like Mariupol, and that's how they're making their headway. So they're starting to make some headway in the eastern Donbass, and so we have to watch that one closely.
Okay, so that's 100% accurate, true. Hey, the Western Donbass already taken care of. That's Mariupol, right? In those places like that. And now it's already over in the East. But so I don't know how long ago this was, but here we go.
General Twitty, is there something that the president said? Are there things we're not doing that we should be doing? Is there things that you would recommend at this point?
Well, as I take a look at this is, Secretary Austin came out that we're going to weaken Russia. We have not really defined what weaken means, because if you take a look at the Ukrainians right now, I take a strong belief in Colin Powell's doctrine. You overwhelm a particular enemy with force. And right now, when you take a look at Ukraine and you take a look at Russia, they're about 1-to-1. The only difference is Russia has a heck of a lot of combat power than the Ukrainians. And so there's no way that the Ukrainians will ever destroy or defeat the Russians. And so we got to really figure out.
Did you hear that? There's no way that the Ukrainians will ever defeat the Russians. This is how they talk to each other.
What does weaken mean in the end state here? And I will also tell you, Richard, there's no way that the Ukrainians will ever have enough combat power to kick the Russians out of Ukraine as well. And so what does that look like in the end game?
They're never going to defeat Russia, and they'll never have enough power to kick Russia out of Ukraine. Ever. And he said, so what does this end game look like? There follows they have more discussion with other participants about potential outcomes in the United States would like to see. Like Ukraine in the state that it was in before 2014. Twitty then explains why those ideas are all unrealistic and that what is needed instead are immediate negotiations. So they're talking about, hey, can't we get back to before we overthrew their government? And he says, no, and we need immediate negotiations. Watch.
So I want to go back to what you said pre-2014. I want you to think about that one because I've had time to think about it here and others here. And what I will tell you, Richard, I learned from the National War College, there's something called ends, ways, and means. So if that's your end state pre-2014, then I'm interested to hear the ways and the means. Because from a military standpoint, if that's the way, then the means would be the Ukrainians lack, again, the ability to pull that off to pre-2014. They just lack that ability. They don't have the combat power. And I also want to remind you, we hear a lot about Russian casualties and Russian losses. We hear very little about Ukrainian losses. And keep in mind, they're losing soldiers throughout this war as well. They started at approximately 200,000. Who knows where they are today? And so it's hard to recruit and maintain that level of professionalism in that military. So that's my first point, the end ways and means. They lack that to be able to go back to the pre-2014. The second point that I would make is, as you look at the dime, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, we're woefully lacking on the diplomatic piece of this. If you notice, there's no diplomacy going on at all to trying to get to some type of negotiations. And I don't think that we can lead that given where Putin thinks about us. But if you sit back and think about those that could possibly be a part of this negotiation team, you have the two up that I'm going to list are in NATO. One is President Orbán out of Hungary. Perhaps he can help out in the negotiation effort. The other one is President Erdogan of Turkey, longtime friends of President Putin, although some view that relationship as transactional. I don't know. Let's put it to the test and see.
So this is it goes on from. I mean, that's amazing. All the stuff he's saying. He's saying all the stuff we've been saying at this show. Someone objects and makes a case for giving the Ukrainians more time by pushing more weapons to them. Twitty dismantles that argument.
The objectives that I set out, I think, are still achievable. And we can set back Russia's strategic objectives and we can help preserve Ukraine. But I subscribe really to Elena's analysis. It's going to be determined, what really Charlie started with, it's going to be determined by developments on the ground. And the focus really needs to be enhancing Ukrainians' ability to counterattack, set back, and then stalemate the Russians. At the same time, we work the economic sanctions to broaden them so that the price over the long term goes up. And yes, do the diplomacy. But I think that neither side is ready for a negotiation at this point. They're waiting for the outcome on the battlefield, and that has to be our focus.
My one caveat, Richard, would be to pick up on one phrase that Alina offered that left me a little uncomfortable, and that is buy more time to give the Ukrainians a fighting chance. Yes, let's continue to arm, let's increase the armament, but let's marry it to the kind of diplomacy that General Twitty mentioned. I'm not sure that time is on our side. Mm-hmm. There's more destruction, there's more risk of escalation, there's more negative knock-on effects. I think we need to push this toward some kind of stalemate sooner rather than later.
Charlie,
go
ahead.
Charlie, I agree 100%, but I will tell you, when you look at time, the Ukrainians have to go into negotiations with the upper hand at a position of strength. And so right now they are at a position of strength. The more this war goes on, we never know if that's going to wane. And then they will lack the ability to go to the bargaining table at a position of strength and may lose more than they intended. And so let's keep that in mind as well.
So he just straightened them out. No, the longer this, we don't have time. Because the longer this goes on, the weaker Ukraine gets and the weaker their negotiating position is. So we better do diplomacy right now and end this. That's what the guy who's the commander of all our European forces is saying.
And even the commander is painting a rosier picture than it really is. Saying that the Ukrainians have strength right now, it's insane. Russia, as he pointed out, has already taken a large swath of their country, and the West is sending in diminished supplies of weapons. The UK and the US in the last weapon shipment of HIMARS systems, they didn't even send a full battery of these systems over to Ukraine, when earlier in the war, we were sending dozens upon dozens of batteries every few days. So it's that even that is like, it's too rosy of a picture.
And here's who he was talking to. He was talking to that guy, Stephen J. Hadley. He's a former national security advisor from 2005 to 2009, and he's a member of the board of directors for the Council on Foreign Relations. It's always a very neocon group. Right? Would you counsel on foreign relations? I would say that. Charles A. Kupchen. He's a senior fellow and a counsel on foreign relations, former special assistant to president and senior director for European affairs. And so that's who was talking there. And this is what they say in this article. They say, there it is. The professional military and the intelligence people know exactly what is up. The Ukraine is already in a very bad situation, and from here on, it can only get worse. They expect that the Ukrainian front line will break down. I am sure they are urging, like Twitty does above, for immediate negotiations using whatever third party is available. It is the White House for which such an outcome is not what it had hoped to achieve. It is the White House for which such an outcome is not what it had hoped to achieve. It can, in fact, not allow it. It is currently blocking any negotiations because admitting to a loss in Ukraine will give the Republicans more ammunition to damage Biden. And so what the Democrats are going to do is extend this war for political reasons, and then thousands of Ukrainians will be used as cannon fodder. And that's what's been happening since it started this, by the way. They're using Ukrainians and the Ukrainian country and Ukrainian people as cannon fodder over a proxy war that we have no intention of winning. Anything else you'd like to say about that, Jackson?
I just think it's so sinister what these people have done. I mean, now they're talking about the potential to essentially create a new army and send a bunch of guys over to the Donbass, take some people out of Kiev. It's just not going to happen. That's not how modern militaries work. You can't just create a new army in the middle of an ongoing battle. And they're sending these, albeit brave men who are willing to do this, into a suicide mission, and they have no remorse. It's disgusting what they're doing.
Here, we're doing stand-up comedy in Los Angeles on June 11th, and then we're going to Chicago, Sacramento, and San Diego on July 16th for the taping of my new special. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets. See you there.